All right, it's July 17th, 2023 on Monday. We have a quorum present. So we're going to call this meeting to order, and Denise is going to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honoring the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Denise. The board mission statement. Tuleso Midway Independent School District educates every student to be a lifelong learner, a person of integrity, and a positive contributor to society. Do we have any public comment?
No, ma'am.
All right. We have agenda item number 1. It's just a report for bond presentation.
This is Victor Quiroga here to go over our bond situation. Just want to check my truck to see if I have glasses. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, great. Well, Honorable President, members of the board, Philip, usually I say Dr. Van Matry, Dr. Wright, everybody, thank you for having me here. Mr. Gonzalez and Adiega, my name is Victor Quiroga. I'm with a firm called Specialized Public Finance, and we represent the district as your bond financial advisors, and we're not the actual lenders whenever you have to borrow money or refinance money. We're just an extension of Philip's staff, basically, that helps you go through the process, start planning for a new project, or if you need a refinance bond, try to get you the best interest rate possible. So we're invited here today to give you a report and to see what the impact would be if you pursue a bond, whether that's as early as November or May. And I know after me you're going to hear a more extensive report about a survey that was conducted in the community about the potential supporting of a bond program. And so with that said, I'm going to start with the presentation. It's the same that's handed out in front of you, but it's also on the screen here. There we go. Okay. So I might need to look at the hardcover myself. My eyes are kind of not that good. So the first page after the cover sheet, this is the outstanding debt that you have currently. And so when we say voter authorized debt, this is all the debt that in the past has been voted in by the TMISD community so you could move forward in your projects. And since that time, you might see the names of the bond issues here. They might have the name refunding. So what that means is that after we initially issued it, at a later point in time when it best suited the district, we went ahead and refinanced those bonds. So that's what the term refunding means. So basically right now, we have principal outstanding balance in the amount of $40,890,000 in principal outstanding for the voted obligations that we have out there right now. On the all this other detail here, it just shows you final maturity, when that specific bond issue is going to be paid off, when we could refinance it next without any type of penalty, and then how much in principal amount that we could refinance in the future. Of that $40 million, about $26 million in the future, we could potentially refinance it, potentially as early as 2025, but it's just all going to depend on what interest rates are going to be at that time. So on the bottom left side there, these are the annual principal and interest payments that are due each year in their schedule. All the debt that we've done in the past, this is all fixed interest rate debt, so the payments aren't going to change unless we pay those bonds off early or we refinance in the future. But well, what I'd like to see here is that you all in the past, especially the last bond program that we did many years ago, the board at the time and the district kept the debt relatively short. You did 20-year repayment terms, so that's good in that it's providing you some capacity currently to pursue some other bonds if you decide you want to move forward. But anyhow, this really looks good. The bar graph there, the debt payment is going down as we're paying off that debt right there. And so just a couple of comments regarding the district's financial position. I'll keep on going here. Currently, all the debt that we have right now, about 78% of it will be paid off in the next 10 years. So that's good in that your existing debt will be paid off relatively soon. And then if you need to fit in a new bond in there, there's a lot of capacity for us to work with that and try to fit in that bond issue and try to minimize the tax rate. Regarding tax rate, right now, our maintenance and operation and our interest and sinking fund tax rate, that tax rate is $1.16 per $100 valuation, which is one of the, if you compare us with schools in the Valley and also the Coastal Bend, that's one of the lowest tax rate structures for school districts in this area. Also, the final point is you're a highly rated bond issuer, and this is from an independent rating agency called Moody's, where they, whenever you issue debt or refinance debt, or maybe every couple of years, they'll come in and look at your finances, look at what's going on in the economy in the area, and so they're rating you right now at a AA3, which is a pretty strong credit rating for a school district our size. So all to say that if you do need to move forward and issue a bond, you all won't have any issue finding bond investors or getting a pretty good interest rate on your bonds. So this next slide, I'm a little nervous. Don't kick me out of the room just yet. So in the survey that you're going to see, and I saw just a little bit summary of it, in the survey that will be shared with you in the next agenda item, there was a range of bond amounts in there, like from $130 to $165 million. So what I want to do, I'm just going to give you like the highest amount there, just to kind of give you the biggest kind of capacity and impact analysis. I'm not saying that you need to do $165 million. That's all to you all and the community, but this is just give you the upper range there so that as you continue talking and planning, you could decide, maybe we don't want to do 165, we could do a little less, but at least it'll give you the high kind of impact figures. So with that said, this is assuming a $165 million bond program. If we had a November bond election, that's the next cycle that's available for Texas school districts based on current law. We ran two scenarios for you, and they're both at $165 million. The first scenario here is what if we did a $165 million bond program based off of our current property values. So right now, our current property values that we have on the books and that have been certified that we've been working with this year is $3.9 billion. And so if nothing changed next year and we kept the same property values of $3.9 billion, to support a $165 million bond program, the INS tax rate increase that you'd be looking at, and this is just on your INS side, is 16 cents per $100 valuation. So that's how much it would cost if our property value stayed the same next year to support a $165 million bond issue. And so, we'll run, and I'll show you what that impact would be on homeowners as we move along the presentation. We also ran a second scenario. Right now, the preliminary values that the district received from the appraisal district has a pretty significant increase in your property values from $3.9 billion to $7.2 billion. And so that's good because the more property values that you have, the less of a tax rate increase you would have to set on your taxpayers in order to support this bond. So running the same analysis, if we're working with a $7.9 billion figure, which is the preliminary figure that we're looking at, instead of a 16-cent increase, we're looking at a 2-cent increase. So you can see how beneficial that would be if that were to come to fruition, and if the particular taxpayer that's seeing most of that increase would pay their taxes. And so we wanted to show you kind of that range, what it looks like if the property values don't change, it's a $3.9 billion, or if we go up to $7.9 billion. And we'll get certified values next week, and we'll kind of see where we land right now. But again, we just wanted to give you the range there. Whenever we're talking about tax rate increases,
And what's the max rate we could do?
the tax rate, the max rate that you could do is 50 cents per $100 valuation. So right now we're at 15 cents, and so you have about 35 cents to work with. So if you do a $165 million bond program, you're not going to be at your capacity. You're still going to have room in case in the future. And so this is actually a great segue because that'll take us over to the tax rate. It's going to be like a broken record on some of these slides. You'll see in the bottom, homeowners with the over 65 homestead exemption. Those property taxes are frozen. They're not going to see an increase on if you do pursue a bond in the future. So looking at the tax rate history, this is going back since 2012. Currently, we're in tax year 2022. That's what's shown here. The gray area, that's your maintenance and operation tax rate. Right now, we're at $1.01 per $100 valuation. And then your INS tax rate, the tax rate you use to pay your bond payments back, which could only be used if we had a successful bond program, is 15 cents per $100 valuation. So that's where we come up with the current total tax rate right now of $1.16 per $100 valuation. And so the high point for us was back in 2016 tax year, which our total tax rate was $1.41 per $100 valuation. So again, right now we're a lot lower. And a lot of it has to do with compression. The state has required you to reduce that gray area there too. Right now there's current legislation that's been approved, but from last I heard a couple hours ago, hasn't been signed yet by the governor. But the anticipation is that they'll sign that legislation that was agreed upon by the House and the Senate, and it had some impact here on the bond program that we'll talk about later. So looking at the property values, this is going back since 2012. The 10-year growth rate is on average we're going about 8% per year. And that takes us to the $3.9 billion figure that we're at currently. And again, the preliminary values show an increase of $7.9 billion, which would be nice if you're considering a bond program because, the tax rate won't be as large. But we'll just kind of see how that goes. And so that's where we stand currently. So looking at the breakdown, here at the district, obviously, we rely quite heavily on the top 10 taxpayers, and we'll outline them on the next slide where we're at. But based on the current values that we have right now, $3.9 billion, the top 10 taxpayers account for about 68% of those values. So the majority of those values are coming from the top 10 taxpayers. The industrial or commercial tax category, when you look at all the different taxpayers in your community, about 89% are coming from what we call the industrial commercial taxpayer category. What that means is about 11% are the actual homeowners or the folks that vote for the election. So if you were to do a bond, we've shown this in the past as pie graph, if you do a bond, the individual homeowners will account for about 11% of that bond payment if you decide to move that. This could possibly change pretty significantly if that $7.9 billion figure holds. That single-family home category, it'll be less than 11%, probably pretty significantly. So again, just some things to keep in mind as you continue to talk and potentially plan for a bond program. The next slide here, again, this is based off current property values for 2022 tax year, the current year that we're in right now. You can see there how the top 10 taxpayers are broken up. They account for the $3.9 billion, they account for about $2.6 billion or about 68% of your property values. Of course, the biggest, largest taxpayer is Flint Hills. They're at $1.3 billion based off of the preliminary figures that we've seen. I think, they're the ones, that particular entity, they're the ones that have the largest increase in those property values that we're showing. So again, just for more information as a reminder to the board.
This was the first year CC Polymers is off of,
No, we're
the
still,
313s?
we're still in the agreement. They're only taxable on the INS side. Still, they're only taxed at $30 million on the M&O side
Okay.
for like a couple more years.
Got it.
Going over to the next slide, let's talk about the taxpayer and the homeowner and how they pay taxes and what that how any future bond program would impact them. The school district is very, pretty unique in that you all offer an additional exemption to your taxpayers. It's not very common. The vast majority of my clients and the firm clients, they don't offer this. I think, unfortunately, there's no public data that's easily accessible from the comptroller's office, but I think it's fair to say that very, very few districts offer additional homestead exemptions. We usually see this communities like yourself where you have, significant industrial commercial taxpayers out there, where those school districts for the last 20 years have been offering this additional exemption. So what I'm talking about here is, let's just look at if my home, and I live here in TMISD, my home is appraised at $200,000 is what the appraisal district appraised my home. What do I actually pay taxes on? Well, under the current law right now, the state requires school districts for you to shave off $40,000 from that value. TMISD also adds the additional 20% local homestead exemption, so you shave off even more to your taxpayers that own homes. And so if you were to, right now, this past year when we pay taxes, your appraised value is $200,000. We take off the $40,000 that's required by the state. We take off the 20% of the $200,000, so that's $80,000 that you take off. So you're paying taxes not on $200,000, but you're paying taxes on $120,000. So when you calculate the taxes that you're paying for a bond and just for the taxes for the school, that's the value that we're paying taxes on. And we did the same exercise for $300,000. Of course, the $40,000, that's just a straight dollar amount. The 20%, they get even more because their home is valued more. So they're paying not taxes on $300,000, but on $200,000 home value. Again, over 65 homestead exemptions will not see a tax rate increase.
Sorry, I have another
yes,
question.
ma'am.
The 11% is for residential single-family homes. Do you have a percentage on what is over 65 out of that 11%?
I don't have it here, but we could get that information for you.
That'd be awesome.
We could dig that up.
Because I would like to, we're maxed out on providing additional homestead exemptions to the average homeowner, but I would like to increase exemptions for over 65, which we have the leeway to do.
Yeah.
Let me ask you another
Yes,
question. On the over 65, because when we do advertise for a bond or whatever, we have to put this as a tax increase.
Yes, sir.
I mean, but can we market, or I don't know if you know this or not, but can we market to the over 65 that there isn't a tax increase?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because they're the ones that,
Those-
oh yeah, exactly. You said,
Education is key.
well, yeah, but it's been like this for a long time and they still come out and vote against
Yeah,
a lot of tax.
Yeah, and you all aren't unique. When we do bond elections throughout the state for our school district clients, over 65 homestead, they're the most active voting demographic. And I didn't realize this until like the survey that you all had conducted and other school district clients had conducted, is that people are aware that they have the over 65 homestead exemption. They're not impacted by bonds, but they don't believe it.
Exactly.
And so that's where education is key, and you're free to share information like this and let them know that they won't be impacted by a bond.
We gotta make them believe, I guess.
Yeah. So what does the proposed law look like? And so as a taxpayer, as a homeowner, it gets even better. So the state right now, what they recently approved is that the state mandated homestead exemption isn't $40,000. They're going to increase it by $60,000 to $100,000. So if I were to own a home here, it's $200,000 appraised. The state requires the school district to shave off that appraisal value by $100,000. And then also TMISD, we have the additional 20% homestead exemption. You're going to shave off another $40,000. So you're actually going to be paying taxes on a value of $60,000 versus $200,000. We did the same exercise for $300,000. That takes it down to about $140,000. So the previous example, you can see there for a $300,000 home, I'm paying taxes on $200,000. The impact of the recent legislation that's about to be approved will take it down to $140,000. So.
You
so
said,
again-
I'm sorry, you said it's about to be approved?
Well, the House and Senate approved it last week, and they went through committee, and so right now it's sitting on the governor's desk. But all indication is that he will sign it. After that, it is, since it's a constitutional amendment, we would all have to vote on it, but the likelihood of it not failing is very slim. So I'm sure it'll be a slam dunk.
And that is this November.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. Any questions on, probably sound like a broken record or something, but any questions on the homestead? We like showing this because you all are unique in that you have the additional homestead exemption because you have a big industrial segment or taxpayers out there that make up the difference.
So trying to tie the two together, is that possible? Like, you come in November, tying in to the voters that this is where you're gonna be, this is where you were, right? That's what we wanna do, right?
Yeah.
Because we're asking for this money, but in all actuality, with this that's passing and some of the other things that are happening, there's gonna be a huge impact on it.
Yeah.
So that's something for us to keep in mind, trying to tie that together so that you can sell the thought process of, even if it is a tax increase, what is the number compared to where you were, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so, other districts are going to do a bond in November. They're already saying, you are going to have the $100,000 impact. So it's just a matter of communication and information. And put that. Yes, sir.
That mandate for the $100,000, how long is that mandate for?
Once they vote it in, it's for
Until they vote
forever
it out?
until they change it again because it's a constitutional amendment. We all vote on it, and unless they come up with new legislation and we vote on it again as a state, it won't change.
I would like to provide additional tax breaks. At one of the previous meetings, I think Steve said that goes through your office for analysis. Is that accurate or?
Oh, just the
inaccurate?
financial, well, there's two components. So me as your financial advisor, I focus on the numbers, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough to be dangerous and stuff. But so in terms of the dollar amount, we could help kind of calculate what the impact would be. But more on the INS side, because that's our specialty on the bond side. Then we'll have, your general counsel and also the bond attorneys to help analyze, like legally, how do we get that done and what's available. So on the legal side, I'll defer to them on that. But yeah, we would all be involved to help you see what the impact would be of that. Moving on here, we ran two scenarios that we summarized before. So this is our first scenario. What if our property value stayed at $3.9 billion that we currently have? We know that to support a $165 million bond program, the INS tax rate increase is 16 cents per $100 valuation. So what does that do to me as a homeowner? If I were to own that $200,000 home that's appraised for $200,000, and then after I deduct for the exemptions that I get at the state and local level, I'm paying taxes on $60,000. The monthly impact to me as that homeowner, that $200,000 home, based off 16 cents is $8 per month, is what I would have to pay to support a $165 million bond program. We did the same thing for $300,000 there, and you can see that. So this scenario two, this is on the upper range of the property values. What if, they are certified at $7.9 billion, and what if, taxes are paid based off of that higher value? Instead of a 16-cent increase to pay and support the $165 million bond program, it's only going to cost 2 cents to support the $165 million bond program. So what does that do to me as a person that owns a $200,000 home here in the district? After the exemptions, I'm looking at a $1 per month increase on my taxes to support this bond program. We wanted to provide a range, what it is now versus what it could potentially be, just because there's a little bit of unknowns of what the value is going to be certified next year, and then there's unknowns about what's going to be paid when those tax bills are sent out.
Yeah, can you talk through that? Because I know they're going to be approved at that amount, but if they're not paid at that amount, how does that affect our future INS rate?
Yeah.
Does it?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the way to think about how much values we have here and what the tax rate has to be on your debt, it's like an inverse relationship. The higher the property taxes I have, the lower the tax rate I get to set on my bond repayment, and then vice versa too. So here we also have a few years of history where the value was protested and not paid on the full amount. Hopefully there's a resolution in the near future on previous taxes. But with all the analysis that we've done here, most school districts, their tax collection rates, how much property taxes they collect on the tax bills that they send out each year is about 98 to 101%. Here at the district, it's not been that case. And so all the models I'm showing you here, I'm not assuming that we're collecting 98%. I'm assuming that we're collecting 90% and a lower figure. So you asked what would happen, and this is why I want to show you both ranges, because if it's somewhere in the middle, then you have a sense of what the tax rate would be. Because if they don't pay taxes on $7.9 billion, they pay taxes on less, then it might not be 2 cents, it might be 4 cents or 5 cents or something. So, but that's going to be like an annual kind of look as a board. What tax rate we're going to have to set that year based off of the property values and what we think are, taxes going to be paid at in the future. So I guess that's all to say. It's kind of unknown, but the fewer property value that we have to work with, the higher the tax rate.
It's a bet we're gonna take on the percentage they will pay?
Not on, in a sense, because what you're going to do if you do move forward on a bond program is that you would ask the community to let you borrow money on their behalf. It's up to you on when and how to issue the bonds.
Okay, the draws.
Yeah, so here I'm assuming $165 million, and I'm assuming it's gonna be like 2 cents or 16 cents. That's assuming that we sell all the bonds all at once. We've never done that here in the past, even at smaller amounts. We're probably gonna do this over a 3-year period. The reason why is because it's going to take you a while to spend $165 million. It's going to be like a 3-year process. You don't spend that much in 1 year. And so because of that, you don't have to go into debt for the full amount all in 1 year. You just split it up over 3 phases. So that would benefit you as a tax, as you setting your tax rate, because we're not going to set, let's just say it's $3.9 billion. We're not going to set taxes the first year on 16 cents. If you break it up over 3 years, you get to incrementally increase that tax rate. And so that'll give you an opportunity as a board to kind of see, okay, where are the property values, where are they going to be certified, and what do we anticipate a certain taxpayer, what level are they going to pay at, and what have they been paying at past couple of years. And so you don't take as huge of a risk in that, because we're not going to sell all $165 million or whatever amount you do all at once. We're not going to set the full tax rate all at once either.
I have a question. Do you have, or do y'all not, is this something you guys don't do, to be able to tell us how many new homes, like in the past 5 years? Because although these numbers are great, 2 cents, 16 cents and all that, but what's really hurting our younger people that have moved into the area and bought new homes is their mortgages. So yeah, you can sell the point of 2 cents all day long, but they're seeing their mortgages go up sky high. So you mentioned the word tax increase, and it scares them half to death. So are you able to tell us how many new homes, because these 24, 48-month open-end loans that they've gotten tricked into because they didn't know any better, went from 2% interest to, whatever it is now. And that's what's going to hurt us, I think, for the bond, is that people have seen their mortgage,
Their appraisal.
their mortgages just go skyrocket. And I think that's something that we have to figure out and be able to target those people and say, okay, there's nothing we can do to help you on the mortgage side, but we're going to help you on the tax side. It's not that we're increasing taxes, it's just that your values went up drastically. But I think a lot of the younger people that have moved into the area in the past 4 or 5 years have a lot of these horrible mortgages.
The non-fixed interest rates or what you're talking about?
They're open-end
Yeah.
mortgages,
Yeah.
yeah.
They just-
Their arm or open, whatever you wanna call them, they're open on the backside, and that's what's really hurt our economy. And although only 11% of the people accumulate for this whole bond, our tax entity, but that 11% is the ones that vote yes or no.
Yeah, it's still a tax.
So it's, they're
Yeah, I
the
don't want
ones
to
that.
minimize that, I just want to show.
No, I understand, but
yeah,
they're the
it's
ones that
still
are
a
gonna
tax
tell
on
us,
people.
even though they're only 11%, they're the ones who are gonna say yes or no to this bond. So, I think, I would like to know, I don't know, like I said, if y'all do those studies or not, how many new homes have come into our area, or,
But I think even more than that, you're not wanting to know just no homes, you're wanting to try to find how many are ARM, right? Because, I mean, new homes, if they say there's 2,000 new homes, well, that doesn't tell us
mean all
anything
over.
about who has adjustable rate.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you really want to find out is,
Really what-
what's the percentage of adjustable rate mortgages that people are going to be
Yeah,
skittish? That may be harder to find.
Yeah, actually, so we could find out how many homes have been built and how many came on the tax roll that were newly constructed the past few years. What's not public data is what kind of mortgage they have.
no, I understand
Yeah,
that,
so-
but
so
what
that
I'm saying,
part we won't be able to
and,
get.
I didn't ask for that. What I'm saying is, we could potentially target some of these new homes and explain our side of it, almost like we want to do with the 65 and older,
That's a good
to,
point. That's a good point.
to address those new homeowners that, although this is your mortgage, but on our side, on the school side, we help you with this, plus we help you, this increase is not gonna, it's not gonna be like what you had on your mortgage, we're asking for 8 cents or $8 a month versus, or even go lower if it's a 7.9, even lower, you know what I mean? Just so that we can know where to target a little bit closer.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah,
bonds.
we could work with the.
Because if somebody bought their homes 10, 15 years ago, they're pretty much on the fixed rate, and they have a heck of an interest rate on their mortgages, they're fine. But these new homes, whether it's 500 or 2,000, is something that I think we could potentially market to these people.
Yeah, we'll do some research and see how many home units have been built in the past few years. We'll also look at how many of them have the over 65 homestead exemption currently. And then we'll follow up with the administration and get that information to you.
Cool.
The final slide here is kind of a good segue in terms of, here, this is just an example of what the tax rate increase could look like. And I'm just using the more conservative one, the $3.9 billion in this final slide here. What if we do have a successful $165 million bond program? As I indicated earlier, we probably won't issue all that debt all at once. We'll do it over 3 years. And so this is just looking, how would you layer that in? Right now, we're at 15 cents, our interest and sinking fund tax rate. We would increase it by 16 cents over a 3-year period. This is just to show you that, even after 3 years, and even with our conservative lower property values that we're looking at right now, $3.9 billion, the total tax rate could potentially be $1.32. That's still lower than what it was back in 2016. The only difference is we have $165 million in bonds to work with to address any facility needs that you have. Of course, this is assuming that M&O tax rate stays the same, and that's probably not likely either. So,
Does the board have any authority to change the current, tax rate for INS with or without a bond?
yes, you do have the interest and sinking fund tax rate. That's the only tax rate now that you have control over. The M&O tax rate, we currently use what the state tells us to use. The INS tax rate, we did that actually for this current year. We kept it at 15 cents so that we could try to pay off bonds a little sooner. And so, but no, you do have control. Usually when districts do change the tax rate, let me back up, I'm sorry. The INS tax rate, we could only, historically, under old law, is that the tax rate that you set on the INS side or the debt service side, you could only base that based off of the next year's principal and interest payments that you have scheduled and that are on the books. A few years ago, about 13 years ago, the state allowed school districts only to set a higher INS tax rate if it wanted to, and use that extra money that it's collecting to start paying off bonds sooner. That's the only thing you could use it on. So most districts, if they are not setting the tax rate based off what the debt that they have on the books, they're usually going to set it higher so they could collect extra and then use that extra money. By law, you have to use it to start paying down on the bonds sooner. And so that's the option that you have.
Is it a strategy to slightly raise it because we're so, like, it's unpredictable what would happen between the 16 and the 2 cent?
Yeah, so let's just, and we'd be busy with Philip pretty closely. Let's just say it turns out to be $7.9 billion. You know, we'll have to kind of run some analysis, because if it is $7.9 billion,
It's gonna be 7.9, it's just gonna be like at 60%.
yeah. So that's the analysis that we'll be running at. How much do you think we're going to pay of that, or they're going to pay of that?
Yeah.
The thing is that if it is at 7.9 billion, remember I said it's an inverse relationship. For next year, your INS tax rate could probably be lower. You know, if you're thinking about a bond in November, May, whatever it is, many districts don't want to decrease their INS tax rate, because that just means you're going to have to go out and ask for more.
Oh, I'm talking
Yeah.
about increasing
Oh, yeah.
to cover the variance later on.
Yeah. So our analysis assumes that even at the higher tax rate, the entire property value of 7.9, that we're going to keep the tax rate at 15 cents where it is right now. Yes, you can do that. The only thing is that what you're talking about, you know, can we set it higher and then kind of bank that money and keep it as a safety net for future years? Is that what you're asking? Or?
No,
We're pretty much limited. We're limited by, we're supposed to set it by what we owe, our debt payment. We have to collect enough to cover our debt payments. We do have the option, school districts have the option to set a higher rate to pay off debt. And then we're also constricted in that, in trying to deal with unpredictability like that, there's, right now, the law says, or the county assessor, he can certify our values, but we're only allowed to use the lowest actual collection rate from the last 3 years. So
sucks.
we've been at 90%, so we're 90%, but if we have a year where, if our biggest taxpayer withholds a lot, especially on this big value, our collection rate could drop down to 70, but we would not be allowed to that first year. We wouldn't be allowed to the second year, and we'd have to hope that we had enough in our fund balance to cover that shortage for that year.
I guess, so that's why I was asking, like, is it possible to raise from 15 cents to 17 cents?
Yes.
Pay back our current debt, but then when the bond passes, whether it's a 20 or the 16 pennies, you kind of soften the blow by at least 2 cents or something.
Well, my understanding though is if we purposely say we're going to set it higher than what we're allowed to, we have to commit that money to pay to the defeasance, right?
Yeah.
Well, so you could, so that's my question. Committing it that year, yes. But then the following year, when the bond is enacted, then can you go back to paying minimums on everything? Or no, does it have to stay at that higher rate
No,
of
it's an
payment?
annual decision.
Yeah, so that,
It's an annual board
I think that would be
decision.
a really smart move, as we're kind of waiting to hear more on the predictability.
Yeah, because if you have let's just
Because
say
then
you
the
have
taxpayer's gonna see, yeah, it could go berserk versus if we ticker up slightly, it could be more steady.
No, I agree. I think you won't put your taxpayer in a kind of tax rate roller coaster, you know.
Yeah.
So down 1 year, up 1 year, and then down. And so that's why many districts purposely, you know, control it. Either they keep it the same or they increase it by 2 pennies. But yeah, that's an annual decision that you would do. So if you were to do, let's just say you do a November bond election, you're not really selling bonds, the first set of bonds, until a year from now, basically.
Yeah.
And then, so you won't be talking about paying that bond until the following, year, that tax year. So you're still kind of a bit of ways, but in the meantime, if you keep it at 15 or increase it to 17, I think that's probably wise, in my opinion, because it offers some stability there.
Yes.
And then not only that, it's kind of a win-win because we're going to personally collect some extra money, and legally, we can only use that extra money to pay off the existing debt that we have on the books right now. And so they'll just give you a little bit more flexibility, especially with the.
Which is also good, knowing the unpredictability.
Yeah,
On
exactly.
if we're getting the collection rate. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a big if right now.
It's humongous. Like,
Yeah.
the county's been filled with lawyers like the past 3 weeks, so.
Victor, and just for my personal knowledge, on the 20% local exemption from the school district, is that the highest we can go, or that's it?
That's the highest for a normal residential person. The 65 is where we have room. We also have room with the, if you pay your taxes early, we could provide some additional point exemptions. So those are the only two options remaining for Toloso. 65 and disabled, and then early payment.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Was that correct? I'm sure that's correct.
That's her wheelhouse.
Threw her hanging curveball, man. Get that out of here.
All right, any other questions or comments? That's good
Very, very
information.
encouraging information.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah, no, y'all, either way, y'all are in pretty good financial position. So. But yeah, I didn't realize I talked this much, I'm sorry, and thank you for letting me.
You did a great job.
And so, yeah, we'll follow up on the information, anything else, Phil knows how to get a hold of us. So.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a safe drive back.
All right, agenda item number 2 is a report base lice presentation.
Get them on Zoom.
Face volume.
Hello?
Hey, Matt, can you hear us?
I can. Y'all hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to, just want to pop in and say hello. I'm going to go off camera and share my screen. We have a lot of information to share with you and keep this to about 30 minutes. I'll allow time at the end for questions. But if anyone has a question as I'm going or needs me to slow down, please just speak up and let me know. Go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So can you all see what I'm sharing? Toloso Midway ISD voter survey.
Yes.
Can we go full screen?
So we interviewed 250 voters. The margin of error to a sample of this size is 6.2%. Did a collection or a mixture of interviewing by telephone and web. We had live telephone interviewing. We sent some text messages and folks could take it online that way. And then 54% of the respondents responded to that postcard that was sent in the mail. Into the results, just want to review what our objectives were with the survey. The first thing we wanted to do was measure the image of the school district and assess some specific attitudes about fiscal management and condition of school buildings. We wanted to measure what we call the initial and the informed levels of support for a bond proposal of $130 million. Both of these measures are really important. The initial opinion or the initial ballot really tells us where we are today without voters, really many of them knowing what the bond would include. And it gives us a starting point. In mind that the voters are only going to know what's printed on their ballot or know what information they may see, read, or hear between when you call an election and when the election is held. The informed ballot lets us know kind of our potential maximum support once voters have been fully informed about the proposal. Our third objective was to test the favorability of potential bond projects individually. That lets us really do two things. First, understanding how much support there is for different types of projects, but it also, by testing that information, it allows us to inform the respondent of what the proposal does, and then that's how we come back at the end and ask that informed. Then our fourth objective really was to dig into some specific preferences regarding an early child center or a junior high as a way to address growth, how they felt about a CTE center versus a junior high at a certain location, and some of those types of views, and that will become more clear as you see the way we frame some of those questions, and ultimately asked if they would be supportive of a bond proposal of $165 million that included more of these projects. So when we're looking at this data, we want to kind of keep in mind that the demographics of who we talk to and how that compares to what we would say likely voters. And two of the most important demographics really are partisanship and age. When we look at partisanship, we can look at it based on whether or not the respondent is a Republican primary voter, not a primary voter, or a Democrat primary voter. When we look at the voter file, 78% of registered voters really are participating in partisan primaries. It's 13 Republican, 10 Democrat. When you look at a November, this is the last midterm that we just had, 27% were Republican primary voters, 18% Democrat, 55% non-primary voters. If you look at like an odd year November, what you typically see is a higher proportion of primary voters showing up to vote because they're voting in primaries, so they're likely to be voting in constitutional amendment elections. And what we typically also see is that the Republican share grows. So looking ahead to 2023, you see that the Republican primary voters make up a large proportion of those that will be voting. And that's just kind of standard if nothing else was done to put the thumb on the scale in terms of turnout, trying to turn out different types of voters for different measures. That's just sort of like what it was in the last odd year of November election. When we look at the survey, now we have 48% non-primary voters, 40% don't have as many Republican primary voters in the survey as might be participating in the upcoming constitutional election. And so we'll show you how the numbers, the ballot may change when we adjust for that.
And I have a question. Those are based off of our specific precincts or addresses?
Yes. The voter file. So that's based on, I guess your precincts, the voter file.
Yeah, I guess so like precinct 101, it's split into A and B between our school district and a different school district. I just want to make sure
Yes,
we looked
correct. It's your school district.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, so we contacted the county and acquired just the voters registered in the district.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll pause here and say November 2021 numbers you see here are it's not a given that that's what's going to be in November 2023 because different types of measures on the ballot, different activities done by organizations to promote or dissuade voters from voting on things can have an impact on the turnout in a lower turnout election. But the November 2021 is just kind of a starting point of what we would expect to happen if nothing was really done to encourage people to show up to vote for different types of things. So looking at the age distribution, this is the second most important demographic. We look at it in these three age groups, 18 to 49, 50 to 64, and 65 plus. That's because these extremes can fluctuate quite a bit. Almost 3 out of 5 registered voters in the district are under 50, 19% are senior. In the November 2022 midterm, we saw 45% of voters were 18 to 49, just over a quarter were senior. in the constitutional amendment election of 2021, almost half were senior. You've got 79, almost 80% over 49 years old. So these tend to be dominated not only more so by Republican primary voters, but also by older voters. Our survey is really kind of closer to a midterm proportion. And again, we can adjust the ballot and show you kind of what that looks like if it was an older type of turnout. We had 39% parents in the sample, which is great because we have enough interviews. Right here, to kind of look at the big role in terms of parents and non-parents in this type of an election, because so many of the voters will be older senior citizens. And I just want to share with you this distribution of vote history. You can look at it a couple different ways. And I got this off of the voter file too. When the first bar is a registered voter file, we see that 90% of registered voters have not participated in one of the last 4 constitutional amendment elections. So that would be November 17, 19, 21, and then May 2022 was also a constitutional amendment election. It had that exemption increase on it. So out of those 4, 9 out of 10 have not voted in any. Does it mean that they can't vote that this coming time, and it doesn't mean that they won't vote, but we know that people that are going to be most likely to show up to vote will have participated in one of these other elections in the past. When we look at our survey, we have about a third of the respondents have voted in, just over a third have voted in one of these constitutional. Allows us to also look at how they view the bond proposal versus those that haven't voted in one of those elections. Participation in general elections is a bit better than constitutional elections. 35% of registered voters haven't voted in any of the last 3 general elections. So that would be midterm of 18 and 22. And the presidential, look at our survey, you see that 2/3 have participated in all 3 of those elections. Only 8% haven't participated in any. So it does show you that we're talking to people who are pretty active. Maybe they didn't vote in a constitutional amendment election, but most people haven't. But they are participating in elections. And we can break the data down in a really or more recent constitutional amendment. Those that haven't but have voted in all 3 generals, those would be the next most likely voters. And then those that maybe voted in the presidential or one other midterm. And this allows us again to look at their view. So moving on to general attitudes about the district. I like this part because I have really good news to report. Voters are very happy with the school district, only 9% negative. And this is the first number I look at because usually positive and strong positive can fluctuate a lot, but the negative, if you hardly ever see negatives in the single digits. Doing, I would say, 3 dozen of these surveys since our COVID, there's only been a handful that have had a negative in the single digits. And so that's good. The other thing that's great is that among those with a positive attitude, they're more likely to have a strong positive than a somewhat positive. And that's really important because we know that when people have a really strong positive attitude about their school district, they're usually for bonds to begin with. They don't really need to know what's in them. When they learn more about them, they become more supportive, but they're usually for it to begin with. See that here, the numbers in the green highlight, that shows you the net support on our initial ballot. So, if the election were held today, the total sample net is a +16, so just the yes is 16. Look at those with a strong positive opinion of the district, they're at a +46. If they have a somewhat positive, they start off with a -5. And then the negatives and unsure are -43. So there's a big correlation of how they feel about the district and how they support bonds. By the end of the survey, we increased support across the board, but you see notably that those with a somewhat positive attitude really go from a -5 to a +31. So they switch a lot in their support of the bond. 2 other measures to show you. One was the condition of school buildings. 21% think they're in excellent condition. 51% say they're in good. Only 4% think they're in poor condition. And this can be a good thing and a not good thing, because you don't really want all your voters to think that buildings are in bad condition. But we see that there is a correlation with, if they worse off they think the buildings are, the more supportive they are in bonds. So to say it another way, it illustrates one of the objectives in communicating that the schools do need repairs, and the average voter might not understand that. Then when we ask their views of fiscal management, another great report is that only 16% say wastefully and ineffectively. It's lower than the wisely and effectively, which is one thing I like to look for. It's also, under 20%. Most of it's kind of in the 20% range. We always see, as well as to be expected, between 44 and 49%. But looking at it that way, you've got 67, almost 2/3 respondents think that you're doing as well as to be expected or better. So I think that's a great report. You see the same thing here with the correlation. If they feel like you're doing a good job with the money, they're going to be more likely to support. So question 4 was that initial ballot. We asked them how they would vote if an election were held today. We kind of mimicked the ballot language, and that we weren't very specific with projects. We just said constructing, renovating, and equipping school buildings.
I don't hear us.
4% would vote for, and 39% would vote against. This is a great place to start with more support in opposition. But we also look beyond that and look at those with a strong opinion. Because if you don't have a strong opinion, chances are you're probably not going to make the effort to go vote for or against something.
You're just going to say he's cutting in and
It's
out.
true in a lower turnout election when there's not a lot of other things on the ballot. So when we look at that density, we see that we're down to, and that's pretty common. We hardly ever see something starting off with more strong support than strong opposition. In doing a survey, the average voter hasn't really heard what the bond is or what it's going to do, and it's hard to be really excited about that. But it does show that we've got some work to do in terms of educating. I think someone might have a question.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it goes back to question 6, on the general views. When y'all did the survey, and we had 21% of the survey excellent, 51% good. Unless somebody works in the district and knows the conditions of our building, how are these survey persons, how would they know what condition the buildings are in order to survey it?
That's right, they don't. This is really just to get their perception.
So that's just a visual? It's more of a visual, whatever they see, I guess, to get their perception.
Yeah, it's just how do they feel about it?
Okay.
That's sort of, you're sort of making my point, which is the average person really doesn't know, but we don't know in any particular district how their feeling is. So what their perception is doesn't always match reality. But this just gets the perception. And sometimes we see the fair and poor a lot higher, and we sort of go, okay, well, yeah, they sort of get it. Here, there really is a lot of need for some education.
I agree.
So going back to this initial ballot, when we adjust the numbers to account for, let's say, this is the types of people who voted in this coming November were equal or mirrored the last November, and there were more Republican primary voters and there were more older voters. Well, it's 50 to 42 in total. The net's a 20 to 30, so it's minus 10. So it shows us that we do have a steeper hill to climb initially when the demographics are a lot older, and that would basically assume that a lot of parents weren't showing up to vote, and they didn't really know about it or didn't care about it. What I'm showing now is a breakdown of different levels of support and opposition by subgroups. In some of the places where we see the most support, parents, they're 70% against, and when we look at the net intensity, it's a plus 23. So they are for this to begin with. We also see the 0 CE, those are going to be people who haven't voted in a constitutional amendment election before. They're a plus 7 intensity, the younger voters, and really anyone but a Republican primary voter. So non-primary and Democrat primary voters are for this. This isn't anything unusual or kind of specific to your district. This is what we see across the state in statewide surveys, and then every district we poll, we just see that there's a difference in how these partisan groups think about these bonds. So this is where we start off with where we've got good support. And then obviously we're on the other end of the side or spectrum where we have some opposition, pointing to some areas where we may need to educate respondents or voters to see how they might support when they learn more. The parents, non-parents, the most likely voters, Republicans, and seniors. So I want to go through these two questions pretty quickly here. These two get at the senior tax freeze, and we found out that 73% of respondents know that seniors, which is pretty high. 55% though would believe taxes are frozen for seniors when the ballot language says that this is a property tax increase. And I know there was a recent election, and you all are familiar with what the ballot language says, and I'm sure you've heard from seniors that might have been confused about that. What we found is that 36% of seniors know within the sample, know about the tax freeze and would believe it. So it's a pretty small group. So there's a lot of seniors out there that either don't know it or wouldn't believe it. I think this points to an opportunity for some education, but that's only going to go so far because some people just aren't going to believe it. So now at this point in the survey, we started asking respondents if they favored or opposed these different bond projects. And again, if you remember at the beginning, I said we wanted to provide more information about the bond by testing support. I'll go through them sort of thematically here for you. So questions 10 and 11 were about really fixing the condition of school buildings. So in question 10, we said this would allow for maintenance and upgrade to school buildings. The average age is 40 years, and gave some examples of what that would include. 78% of respondents favored this. 19% said they didn't favor it. Question 11, we talked about fixing, making critical repairs, like things to foundations or potholes. 80% favored that. These next three statements were about safety and security. And question 12, 85% favored kind of this list of safety security items. Question 13 was more specific about how the primary and intermediate classrooms are divided by curtains, and that's a safety issue. 82% favored fixing that. And then the last one there, we still said the legislature just provided schools with additional funding for safety and security, but that was earmarked for certain purposes, and this is really going to cover more needs that weren't funded by the state. 70% favored this concept after they heard that information. These next two were about fine arts programs. The first was that the music programs have outgrown their current spaces. This would allow for expanding spaces and making improvements. Question 16 was about instruments, and the way it was worded was that the district offers music programs for all grade levels. Participation and has doubled over the last 5 years. The bond will allow for more instruments to replace those that are worn out and can no longer be repaired to meet growing student demand. 72. On this next slide, we had two questions really kind of dealing with the CTE Center. First was more general, more specific about just CTE and listing the different types of programs that could be at that location. Question 18 didn't mention CTE, but understand that's where it would take place. But the dual credit program, we talked about how interest has really exploded, and this would allow for expanded spaces for this program that helps prepare students for college and also makes it more affordable. You'll see here that a lot of support for both of those. And then these last three, we presented kind of two different options for addressing growth. We told them that the primary school was at capacity or really over capacity. The bond could allow for rebuilding a pre-K, crowding, and expand pre-K to another 150 seats. And 73% favor that, by the way. Another way to address overcrowding at the primary school would be creating a junior high for 7th and 8th grade. The 5th grade would be moved to the middle school to join 6th grade, and the 2nd grade could move out of the primary school into the elementary school. Well, 62% favored that, and it's obviously less than the 73% with the pre-K campus as a solution. But then we followed up and said that building a junior high to alleviate capacity issues at the primary school is a solution that solves multiple problems. It allows you to keep the primary school for pre-K the first, which is what it was designed for, and it also solves a safety issue with the use of city athletic fields by students. And now you see it 74%, just 1 point higher in favor than the solution of building a pre-K and kindergarten campus. So really the takeaway is both are favored pretty equally when they're explained as separate items, but then we'll ask a preference question later and show you which one is more preferred. This slide here, those other types of messages that we communicated to the respondents. I won't go through them in great detail, but just to say we told them about your tax rate, how much the property taxes would increase if passed. Construction cost escalation means get money by addressing needs now. We told them that many districts have years to provide a dedicated stream of funding to make repairs to schools that would save money for operating funds for teacher salaries and student programs. So just a kind of a flavor for what we provided to the respondents in this section. And I want to show you where we ended up on the informed ballot when respondents, after they heard all that, ended up with 67% in support and 28% in opposition. And you see that on the important density measure, where really saw a lot of movement when voters learned more about these projects, and not surprising because there was so much support for those individual projects. We adjust the demographics for get kind of a tougher look, more older voters, more still come out on top with the intensity 29 to 21. And this slide here is just showing you a comparison of where we started and where we ended up with different subgroups. I'll just point out that at the end of the survey, after they heard everything, we're sort of at a break even with the 1+ CE. It's a +1 on that intensity. So it's really after they heard everything we had to say and they didn't hear anything negative. Kind of best case was a toss-up with their intensity. That tells me that turnout's also really important. So digging into that voter file, getting parents, getting younger voters, you see the non-parents are at a +3, which is within that margin of error. And again, that's, they didn't hear anything negative, they didn't hear anything factual or inaccurate. And it's only a +3. So education and information is important, but so is turnout. So we had some questions, as I mentioned, about preference for solving growth at the primary school. And I'm happy to report there was a clear answer. Sometimes it's 45% one thing and 45% with the other, and it's frustrating because not really sure where to go with it. Here it's clear, 56% prefer building a junior high as a way to solve for growth at the primary school. We did offer this choice of saying, or do you oppose both? And 19% chose that. It's important to point out and to keep in mind because you're going to have people that are going to vote against the bond no matter what you do. So when you look at the people who at the end of the survey said, yes, I would vote for the bond, when you look at those people, 69% of them prefer building the junior high as a way to address growth or overcrowding, I should say, at the 62% of those that were against the bond at the end. The next question was really about the type of junior high that we told them there were two options. One was to build next to the high school for shared use of facilities that could create scheduling conflicts with high school programs and could limit student use. The other option would be to spend another $35 million to build a again, pretty clear direction from those standalone site with its own facilities. You have the same 19% really just don't want to do anything.
Yeah, we can read this.
And when you look at the people that were supportive of bonds at the end of the survey, 2/3 of them would rather have a school on its own site.
Matt, can you hear us?
Yes, I can now.
Okay, sorry, we're having really bad audio, so some of the words you're saying from the presentation are cutting in and out, and some of the board members have questions.
Okay, let's get those questions.
I have a question, Matt, for you. Considering the size of this district and the number of voters in this district, you only had 250 respondents. So these figures, these percentages, are they a valid indicator of how people would come out and vote either for or against the bond? The number just seems to me like that you didn't really get a very good number of people to respond to the survey, considering the size of the district and the number of voters in this district. So I'm concerned about the numbers. The numbers, the percentages are positive. All of the percentages seem to be, really good. But based on 250 respondents, I'm feeling a little bit concerned that may be just a little bit over. Maybe.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So I'll say this: the 250 it carries a margin of error, and it's 6.9%. And so we can say with certainty that these percentages are within 6.9% of what it would be if we'd interviewed every single person. I wish that we could have gotten you 300, which is sort of our that would have gotten 5.7%. It would have 50 more interviews would have really kind of helped that margin of error. But with the district is relatively small in size, and we dialed every available phone number we had multiple times. We sent the postcard to every person in the district, and these were the responses that we got back. So I didn't set out to limit you to 250, but that's what we received. And again, the margin of error is 6.9%. But when I know that margin of error and I see things like this slide here, even if we were 7 points off, it still tells you kind of where voters want to go, particularly when you look at those who support bonds. 2/3 of them, support one on its standalone site. So, just kind of have to, keep that margin of error in mind.
May I ask you how many?
For the most part, it doesn't really change the outcome of what the voters are telling us.
Matt, may I ask you how many surveys did you send out?
I don't have that number memorized off the top of my head, but we mailed to every registered voter household in the district, and we dialed every registered voter phone number that we could get to the voter file.
Do you have a slight number of what that might be?
I'd have to toggle off my screen and look. I've done like 15 surveys since then, so I can't remember for sure. Give me 1 second.
I'd like to know.
I don't think they were mailed out to every,
I didn't get one, I didn't get a call.
because we have more than half of the board that didn't get one, and we live in the district.
Okay, 1 second. We may have sent to a selected group of like, say 5,000 or so. I'm gonna have to get y'all that answer, and it's gonna take me like 5 minutes to dig through these files. Is there another question I can answer right now?
You can get back to us on that number. It's just that I agree with Janie. I think 250 is really low to be, for us as trustees to be able to communicate with our community and be in a positive note for the bond. That's really, really low.
And you said that you had, I may have not heard you correctly, but did you say that there was, that you used a selection? There was a selective number of voters or population to?
I apologize, but I need to dig through a few different files to see what that is. And I've got this.
So just to be clear, not every, just to be clear, not,
You can't hear you.
you can't hear me.
Go ahead.
Okay, just to be clear, so not all the registered voters in this district were sent a survey not all of them were sent a survey. Is that correct?
I see here our proposal and contract was for sending 5,000 letters. And so if I remember correctly, there were slightly more than that when we look at unique household addresses. So
Yeah, there's 7,000 unique household addresses, about 7,000, yeah. Address.
Voters, there's more.
No, that's yours. Oh, maybe I'm talking voters.
Well, there's a difference between voters and
Yes,
addresses.
yes.
Correct.
So,
I can get you that number. With multiple voters.
These numbers are 2.7%, right?
So again, if I can go back to, the margin of error being 6.9%, when you have these numbers outside that margin of error, they still provide you with, what the voters are saying. Looking at these particular, I don't know, if I see if I'm sharing my screen still. I am. Going back to these, you've got 73% saying they prefer or they're in favor of building a pre-K campus to alleviate crowding. I mean, if we're 7 points off, you still have a huge percentage of people supporting this. So,
I think what she's saying is
that
it depends on the demographics that you were talking to and the areas of our community that you were surveying. Right, Janie? Is that what you're trying to get across?
It would help us understand.
yes, if we could get a better understanding of where these people are that were surveyed, because the demographics, it could be the responses and these indicators, these percentages, I think they're very, I mean, they're pretty high in favor. But where did the majority of the respondents, demographically, where are they? Where were the addresses? Where are the voters? You understand what I'm saying? Just to get a good indicator, because I'm kind of, I don't want to be falsely I don't want these numbers to lead us to believe that this could be this is a good, turnout. We could get, this is a good sign what our voters are going to do. But are they? Because we don't know where the demographic.
Look on the very first page on this.
Right, well, that's what I was attempting to explain here with these numbers in the green.
Yes, here.
So let's look back at the demographics. So where they are is kind of important, but who they are is more important, right? So I can tell you where, what precincts they're in. I can tell you what streets they're on. But when you look at the demographics, primary partisanship, age, those are really important. And what we can do is when we know how Republican primary voters think and Democrat primary voters think and seniors think and 55 to 64-year-olds, we can adjust the weight they have on the data to see, well, what does it look like if the turnout was like this? As someone mentioned, it's the types of people that are turning out that really matter, will decide this. Everyone matters, but they're the ones that will decide this. And what I'm showing here is that when we start off on this initial ballot based on who we surveyed, we're -2 on this intensity. But we can look at, okay, well, if we adjust the percentages of the demographics to mirror the likely voters, it's a -10. So yeah, it's starting off, it's pretty tough. So you might be looking at the 54 and thinking, yeah, this looks really great. Well, I look at it as a -10 on the intensity as a starting point, which is not so great. But we look at the end of the survey and we see that it's a +8 on the intensity.
I don't mean to be, I'm sorry, Matt, I don't mean to be, I don't want to be confused. I don't mean to be difficult with the question, but looking at the distribution of interviews by region, that's just the distribution. That's not your responses, correct? In other words, you had more. Yeah, looking at your graph, you have distribution of interviews by region.
The end number is the respondents. So you had 90 from there, 114 from here, and 46.
Oh, y'all looking at the maps?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you had a good.
Okay. Yeah, so this map here shows the regions. So there aren't enough interviews in every precinct to look at those that way. This was kind of really more of a challenging area to divide by precinct because of the limited number that we had. But we clustered them together for these regions, and I can tell you by each precinct how many we had. But when you add up precinct 111, 49, 101, when you look at the average vote in the area, it's about 46%, and that's what we have in the survey. So the regional distribution of interviews is pretty close to where pretty close to your distribution of interviews when you look at voting participation. I can give you a distribution by precinct if you'd like.
Well, I think it lines up with.
Into that level of detail on this slide.
I think it lines up with the populations too, right?
Yes.
The yellow part is less populated.
Yes, it is.
Correct.
And we got, 46 votes out of that, which has very few, and I assume, just by living here.
You gotta wait about all that in.
So I think stuff like that leads me to believe that it is a good sample because of the numbers you got from it. Like if this was if you would have had 200 votes from the yellow area, well, that wouldn't have been good. Right? Because that's.
It tends to happen that way too. When we do these, we randomly dial, and when we send out the mailers, we tend to get back something that's in proportion to where the voters are.
And also the blue and the red, so more so the red, I think, than the blue, is where I think we have to attract those voters, the red. Those are the areas that are the older crowd, the over 65s, demographically, I think.
Yeah.
The yellows are mostly new development, The reds are your older neighborhoods with more established community members.
Can everyone see what I'm sharing here? The screen. So these are counts from your voter file that I received from the county. And this is a distribution in column A, a regional distribution of people who voted by those regions. So in the Northeast area, 36.7% midterm, and from the Northwest, we're correlating these labels to that map you're looking at, and then 20.4% in the last midterm from the South.
Yeah, I think the
If you look
distribution
at
is
the
good.
last
Jenny was just asking if
constitutional amendment election, you see the percentages are very similar. If you look at the presidential election, you see that they're also very similar. So when we look at an average, and I didn't look at the presidential because that's just a crazy high turnout. If you average like midterm in the last two constitutional amendment elections, this is what that looks like, 36% in the Northeast. I have to toggle back over to my charts to see what we got.
That's how many mailers I sent out.
36%. In the survey here, we have 18% in the South, and the average is 18.8%. So the regional distribution is consistent. I'm sorry, that's the November.
About 4,000 houses.
18.6% average. So the regional distribution is consistent with your demographics when we look at those regional clusters.
Yes.
And 82% of these that were filled out are from those largely where most of the voters are.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are kind of, like I said, these are kind of weird shaped precincts. We try to group precincts based on how they fit within pre-existing roads or other boundaries like that. It kind of looks like a gerrymandered area, but that's the best way to group. You can't group voters by neighborhood. You really got to use precinct, zip code. Zip code would even be worse. And as I mentioned, I mean, we know every precinct. We can tell you how many were in every precinct. I can provide that after this, but the regional distribution is on point with your voters. The reason I showed you the Republican primary stuff and the age is because those were the two demographics that really weren't in line with November odd year, and took it a step further and showed you what it looks like when the sample is a little bit older and a little bit more Republican, and yeah, we lose a little bit more points of support. Let me go back and let's see, show you here. When we asked them if they preferred a CTE center in a junior high that shares sites or shares with the high school, or if they wanted a bond with no CTE center and a complete junior high, this tells me that they really want the CTE a lot, because we know within the people we interviewed, 51% of them wanted a standalone junior high. But you don't have 51% that want that when you throw the CTE in the mix. So that tells me that, they sort of want a little bit of everything. And when you give them an option for that with $165 million for the CTE and a complete junior high on its own site, you still have support. Obviously it dropped because you increased the price, but you still have a majority of support for that project or for that bond that does all those things. Well, what I'll show you here, and you might be thinking, oh, these numbers look really good and I don't trust it. Well, this right here is why you should kind of, I wouldn't say think that way, but you're sort of right, and you're thinking like this might be too rosy of a picture when you look at the end of the survey, the most likely voters, even after they've heard everything, are a +1 in the intensity. And we have had no control over any negative things they might have heard. And they haven't had a chance to forget the things they've heard. But we see that with those lesser likely voters, we've got a +24%. And this upcoming bond election is a lot different than the November election that you just came out of. Were you in midterm November 2022? Is that right?
Yes.
So that's hard because you're not the big fish in the pond. You're not the game in town. It's governor election, all sorts of down ballot races, and you're competing for voters' attention, and they're getting inundated with mail and phone calls and TV. And it's hard to identify voters, turn them out, and have an impact on the outcome of an election when you have thousands voting. So in a lower turnout election, you have less activity and you have more of an ability to go and find people that are supportive of these projects and get them to show up. And we know that the outcome is really going to be based on, the outcome of the election is going to be based on who shows up and votes. Because these respondents are telling us that obviously not everyone is thinking the same about this proposal. And we know there's pockets of support out there. If we limit it just to the most likely voters and we run a really good campaign and inform everyone, but we don't try to turn out parents or people who wouldn't normally be interested in voting, this could be a toss-up, the +1. It's nice that it's not a negative. There's some districts where at the end of the survey, the most likely voter is a negative on the intensity, and that's really tough because that means you have to outvote that type of voter. There it's more of a split, more of a break even, that +1 within the margin of error. So that tells me that, an important part of the strategy, again, is going to be that turnout. And that these numbers, again, keeping in mind the margin of error of almost 7%, doesn't really change the story in terms of what the strategy needs to be. We know here at the end of the day, Republican primary voters are, even in this sample, after they heard everything, they're still against it in terms of their intensity. And that intensity is so important. So you're probably inclined to look at those for and against, and you see 51-40. That's good, but some of those have somewhat strong opinion. They're somewhat favor or somewhat oppose, and it's the strong that really matters. Does anyone have any other questions about the demographics?
Y'all have any more questions? No, I don't think so.
Okay. Any other questions about the survey data?
So when you said, just a minute ago, you said that looking at his data, I think you used the word your plan of attack or something, I can't remember what word you used. Y'all don't provide that? Like, you don't provide a high-level review that says this is where you need to target, this is your plan that we recommend? I know y'all provided us a bunch of, the conclusions are just kind of generic, like, y'all don't provide something specific that says, after reviewing this information, we recommend you target the Republican, over 65, whatever. Or is that, we have to do that?
Yeah, that's typically what typically happens is a campaign strategist would take that and sort of use the data to come up with that plan. I mean, we kind of liken ourselves to X-ray techs who just sort of take a picture and get a sense for what's going on with the patient, and then a doctor will use the analogy kind of come up with a treatment plan. So we're not really campaign consultant, so to speak, in terms of, specific strategies. But I can tell you the general sense for what the data is suggesting, and that would be, educating the most likely voters because we know that they're going to show up to vote. So anyone that's, and this is where kind of budget also plays a role. So, but it's kind of going through the voter file and finding who the most likely voters are, and making sure that they get information because they need to understand what this is. And then it also needs to include some kind of what I would call ID work, where you identify supportive voters, know who they are, and then that you turn that out or transform that into a turnout operation where you make sure those voters are showing up to vote. So it's really a two-pronged approach, communicating to the most likely voters and then going out and identifying supportive voters and really, you'd say, chasing them to the polls.
Okay.
And as part of our work here, we've provided a messaging guide for what messages to communicate to parents and non-parents, what messages to communicate to the most likely voters and the next most likely voters, so that when you do those efforts, you're saying the right things. But that's sort of where our work ends, and then whether those communication efforts are mail or door to door, community events. That's usually where a strategist comes in.
Okay, my last question is to something to what the effect that Janie was saying. Do you have information that says what a normal turnout is for this kind of the total we put out? What kind of where do we end up on that compared to others? Like, just to give us an idea of did we get a good response? Did we not get a good response? Not necessarily what their numbers were, just in general.
Oh no, I'm sorry, you're talking about the survey response?
Like, is this a normal response? 5,000 sent out 250, or is it low?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty average. So I think we would have maybe expected a little bit more responses, quite honestly, from the 5,000 that we sent out, but it isn't anything like significantly lower than what we've seen. So I wouldn't read a lot into that. There's the demographics of districts can really play a role in that, and also, like, quite honestly, comparing in some districts that we do a mailer and there's 12,000 people, we'll send to the most likely voters. Because we know that they're the most likely to participate. Their response rates are higher here because we sent to almost everyone in the district. It included a lot of people who are registered but don't vote that often. And so the response rate was a little bit lower. So that's kind of part of the issue. I wouldn't misread anything into the response rate being low, as in, that would be problematic for your bond. It's more of a function of that we had to dig so deep into the voter file to send those out, that we included a lot of people who really aren't as plugged in to local issues as in other districts where we have more to work with, so to speak.
Okay.
And keep in mind, you've got a lot of people who are registered and didn't even bother to vote in the presidential election, right?
All righty.
Y'all have any more questions? Anybody? Janie, you have any more questions?
No.
Okay. Denise? Paul? Thank you so much, Matt.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
So that was for report only. No board action is needed. The next agenda item is report only, and it's a budget update.
All right, this will be real quick. Update. Schedule this after that on purpose. Really, not a lot has changed the last time. have done a lot since then. I will tell you what I've updated on the general fund budget. If you look at the one hand, this is kind of a quick summary of what I've updated. I've adjusted for the per capita allocations on the campus. They've decreased because our enrollment's gone down a little bit. I've tweaked the salaries a little bit based upon what our staffing is. And then if you look on the second handout, on the second page, you can kind of see the breakdown of our positions. I have one that's kind of broken down by the general fund and federal funds, and then there's another one that's landscape that kind of shows you all the different positions that we're staffing for this year across the campuses. So I've tweaked the budget to cover that. That doesn't include any increase. And pretty much everything else is still being considered and worked on. But, you know, if you look at future considerations, you know, the number 4, the tax relief plan, you know, that's not going to kick in this year since we have to wait for the constitutional amendment. That'll take place next year. But the big thing is waiting the certified tax values. That's we've got some kind of indication from the appraisal district that they are doing some negotiations with the two big Valero, which is not us, but pretty much Flint Hills says whatever Valero they want the same treatment that Valero gets. So I think there is some work on going ahead and trying to get a handle on their 23 values. I am anxiously awaiting the final settlement details from what they've agreed to for the past years, from 2019 through 22, where we will hopefully get a nice chunk of money. We're working on it to make sure that we can keep some of it. We're still working on that. All the money that's going into the INS fund obviously goes into fund balance, and we get to keep that. It's just the M&O money. We're looking into if there's any options that we can keep some of it, or I'd really like to keep all of it, but it might be subject to recapture, so we wouldn't be able to keep all of it. But we're exploring every opportunity for that.
When would that be? That would be next year's money?
No, the settlement for 2019 through 2022 it's in the draw up stages. It should go to the judge pretty soon in the next few weeks. And it's been indicated that we'll more than likely get the money before the end of before August 31st. It'll be in this fiscal year. Okay. But the one that I'm really waiting for is they're going to try to preempt. We finally settled this 5-year thing that's been going on. I think they're trying to be proactive and just need to wait. Hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll see that they've already agreed to what's going to happen in 23. So there won't be, for one more year, there won't be a mystery of, well, how much are they going to pay? What are they not going to pay? What percentage? Because it does worry me that the significant increases are to our biggest taxpayer already. And so now, with these preliminary numbers, I mean, Flint Hills will be, I don't know what the exact percentage, but it's more than 50% of our total tax base. The numbers are pretty staggering. So in the next 3 weeks, I'm hoping to get an idea of, hopefully they will, just like homeowners go and protest their value and they try to come to an agreement, I hope that they're able to come to an agreement with Valero and Flint Hills before we adopt our budget, so we'll have less mystery or less.
What's the worst case scenario that they don't agree? These guys can carry on a legal fight forever. So does that mean that we could possibly go a whole year without seeing any tax money from them? Because that would really hurt our budget.
I will tell you when, I'll put the perspective. The West plant for the last couple of years has been certified values of about 1.1 billion. They were paying about 75% of that, and they've agreed to pay 90% of it. So that's why they're going to owe us a little bit of money, because they only paid 75%, so they owe us that gap between 75% and 90%. But now we're talking about
$6 billion.
Quadrupling, I don't even know what the number is. It's not, 4 times, quadruple.
More?
It's quadrupling their values. So I'm hoping that they realize what a strain, and it's not just, thankfully, it's not just us, it's the county. And think about the county and Del Mar and the other entities that have both Valero and Flint Hills with them. So they're talking about two big entities, two big amounts. They've got to deal with both of them. Thankfully, we've only got one. We used to have both of them, but Dr. Nelson gave Valero away, which was probably a good idea. So I'm anxiously waiting to see, because that's going to really help me sleep at night if we can at least know before we have to adopt our budget what it looks like. I mean, I can tell you the scenario if they only paid on 50% of their value, then we wouldn't be able to collect enough to cover the INS payment. We'd only have like 1 year cushion to handle the INS part. Now, the good thing, on the M&O side, the state makes us up. Whatever they don't pay us,
Yeah,
the state has to make us up to meet our
but
guarantee.
we'd be in trouble on the INS.
But on the INS side, we could experience, it would definitely wipe out our fund balance if that happened. But I'm hoping that they will reach an agreement and settle their dispute for the 23 years and not start this year after year, we're in limbo scenario.
Since we're talking about the budget, and I know this is an updated report, but I saw that we're having the free lunches again. Is that gonna
Yes.
come out of our general fund again?
No, this year we applied for CEP for the whole district, so now the food service fund is able to absorb our number is, they take our number, and it's actually the kids on the direct serve list. They multiply that by a factor, and I think our number is 85 or 86. I forget which one it is.
It's 86.
I think it's 86. So then what that means is we've applied for all campuses. So what that means is for all the reimbursable meals that we serve, which means it has to be a complete, it's got to have all the components of it. All those meals that we serve, we can ask for reimbursement for 86% of them. So we will have to absorb the cost of the 14%. And since we applied for it ahead of time and were approved, we're able to use. What happened last year was it was too late when we got indication that we could do it. And so we made the announcement, but then it turned out we couldn't, and we couldn't amend the application. We'd only ask for CEP for the primary kids. So, but we went ahead and honored and said everybody that and you'll see that at the end of the year, I'll have the amendment where the general fund will pay the food service fund back for what we owe them for this year for those reimbursable meals.
The 14%.
That free meals that were I'm talking about the year that's just ended.
Oh, okay.
For all the
Yeah.
ineligible people that got a free meal, the general fund has to pay the food service fund back for that because we weren't allowed to use
You
the
don't
food
have that
service
figure
fund.
yet?
I have it.
Just off the top of your head?
I want to say it was under 300,000. I want to say like 250, 275, something like that. And then future considerations. Good news. We've got a few more kids in the seats this first day of school than we did last year. I'm hoping that trend continues because really it boils down to that's what drives the money. All this other stuff, it's amazing. I've told you about Omar's template, and you plug on these figures into it, but there's really only one number that matters, and it's the ADA at the top.
That's it.
That's all the other numbers. All they do is slice the pie up on who it belongs to.
Did y'all
But
come up with the numbers after already?
the pie does not get. The pie only gets bigger if you got
More seats.
kids in the seats, and it's not enrollment; it's attendance. So we gotta hope that the kids are coming back. They come to school. They're there. That's what drives our funding.
I think, Ben had a question. We received a message today about our numbers going up, but it wasn't specific. Do you happen to actually have that number?
I can tell. I can't remember the total number. The intermediate and the middle school were about the same. High school was up over 57, but the primary was down about 50. But the primary does have. I did hear they had a lot. Intermediate primary. It's the families are. Oh yeah, we'll be there on Thursday. We'll be there on Wednesday. We're coming. We just didn't make it the first day. But I want to say that the number's not huge, but we know we start slow and we build up all the way till when everybody else goes back to something. But it is encouraging. That's good. And so just the next time we talk about budget will be on August the 7th. We just got to be prepared in August. We're going to meet a lot in August to start finalizing everything. But we'll have the certified values. Hopefully we'll have some closure on 23, and we know what's going to happen with our biggest taxpayer and what our values are going to be. And just remember, though, the big values, we're only going to get to keep what we're allowed. If millions of dollars could flow through here, but the majority is going to, our recapture is going to start going up because of we get to keep so much. We have to spread the wealth around, so it'll be painful to just pass that money through, but that's the reality of it.
So, I have a question. Can you talk through the reduced staffing consideration?
Yeah, we're just, anytime either through attrition or through any area that we can reduce or we can save on, we're going to aggressively pursue those. Like I said, I've got the positions you can kind of see how the positions are laid out between the campuses and the departments and clerical and teachers. Remember, the teacher category, that includes teachers, librarians, counselors, and RNs is in the teacher category.
The first just budget recap that shows we're at a deficit of, I guess, $500,000.
Right.
And through the future considerations is how we're going to balance it?
Yeah, I got to finish going through all the other worksheets to come up with a balanced budget.
Okay.
But, and also in theory, we have to consider, we just have to consider everything. We're still looking at across the board raises, but we'll have to do some reconfiguring and some reallocation to make that happen. But that's what we'll be doing in the next 6 weeks.
Because right now, this is just the step, right?
Right, that's just things that I know have changed, like the debt service
Yeah.
and funding the positions we have, and knowing that I had the increased subs, and security, we had to look at security and see what we can do for that area. The biggest areas right now, the biggest areas of concern are legal, subs, and security. Those are the biggest items that we almost have no control over them, or we have limited control about them.
The working budget to the plan budget, the high schools decreased by $40,000.
Yeah.
That's extremely significant.
Yeah.
Is it possible for you to give us almost a percentage that each of these programs have actually spent in previous years?
Yes, I can.
Um,
I'll be working on that. Hopefully by the 7th, I'll have some numbers where you can see that.
Yeah, because it would be, I mean, that's how you grow your
Right.
fund balance essentially, is people who are not spending all of their money, and I would be interested to know which, yeah.
Fortunately, everybody,
Departments are not.
most people don't spend all their money. They spend most of it. They don't spend all of it. Like, I need some of that to cover some of the
Yep,
things that wind up.
I understand
going
that.
on.
And then last one, just, yes, future considerations, I would like to add, looking at exemptions for 65 and older and disability. Mentioned that several times now.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks, Philip. All right. The next item on the agenda is number 4, discuss and consider student athletic insurance renewal.
This is pretty much boilerplate standard thing. This is the athletic insurance. We call it athletic insurance, but that's a misnomer. It covers our kids no matter what activity they're in. It covers ROTC, cheerleading. Pretty much if they're on a school trip, it's covered. And this is just the renewal of that. Our athletic department is the biggest user of claims because they have the most injuries that people can use. And we provide this for our kids. It renews on August the 1st. So, any questions?
So Zurich is the underwriter?
Pardon?
Is Zurich the underwriter?
I believe so, yes, yes. That's
How
at the
often
top.
do you review these? Like you say, it's just a stamped nameplate, you just keep going?
No, we go out for bids or we ask for quotes. We've been under a two-year agreement with them. This is pretty much, the premium really hasn't changed that much. It's based upon our enrollment, and it hasn't really structurally gone up in the 13 years that I've been using. Okay.
This isn't to do with you at all, but do we have a trend of how many claims we are filing through this?
I know I could get that.
That'd be really cool to see year over year.
The trainers are probably the ones that deal with the most claims. Any more questions?
All right, I think we have a recommendation.
Madam President, it's recommended that the board approve the student athletic insurance renewal as presented.
I will make that motion, please. The board of trustees approve the annual renewal of student athletic accident insurance plan covered as presented August 1st, effective August.
And a second by Ben. Okay, we have a motion made by Paul and a second by Ben. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
All right, the next agenda item is to discuss and consider employment of non-chapter 21 personnel.
Madam President and board members, this one is just simply an update of titles. The first one is Deputy Superintendent. It used to be Business Manager, which was Philip's previous title. And then the Director of Finance used to be Assistant Business Manager, who is Kathy. So there's been a change of titles, so we're just updating the titles. The position's already been approved, it's just a change of titles. Any questions?
The need to change titles is to match the pay scale, or what? Yeah,
That was Mr. Van Matrice,
just a request.
and that happened a little bit earlier.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I think we have a recommendation.
It is the administration's recommendation that the board approve the employment of the non-Chapter 21 personnel as presented.
Have a motion? Paul? And do we have a second? All right, Leo. All right, we have a motion made by Paul Arriaga and a second by Leo. All those in favor? No opposed, motion carries 7-0. We have a report only for the 2023 to 2024 Student Code of Conduct.
Yes, ma'am. I'm bringing this to the board tonight so that everyone's aware that for the current school year that we just now started for 23-24, the handbooks by TASB were not released until July 11th. And what they do release is the model handbook that has to now move its way over into our handbook with the updates. And so given the timeline and the inability to get that ready, kind of like what we've done in years past, specifically last year, we're just going to extend into this month the last school year agreement on file to give us enough time to prepare the handbook for you all, and specifically the code of conduct that will be brought to you all at the next board meeting. If it's August 7th, it'll be at that meeting.
At the special meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And so that's just a report only to let everybody know that that's the plan until we have everything ready for review and approval.
Is mid-July a typical release date from TASB?
Typical. They were hoping to get it out earlier, but they did obviously experience some issues with the 88th legislature and just having everything finalized with that.
Okay.
So given the kind of wonkiness with how that went, there will be some delays and things being rolled out from TASB and TASA this year.
Got it.
Any other questions?
Looks like we're good. Next agenda item is number 7, discuss and consider approval of district professional development plan.
Madam President, this is a annual yearly requirement. This began last school year with one of the local policy updates to the EC, which now requires that each school district provide a district level professional development handbook that outlines the requirements set forth by the Clearinghouse, which is sponsored by SBEC. The Clearinghouse recommendations are provided with you all in your booklet. And so you can look to see exactly what those state level requirements are. Those requirements are also required to be included in the handbook. From there, the handbook is built, and then it becomes more specific and differentiated according to the role, the responsibility, the assignment, whether teachers are new, 0 year versus new to the district, and so forth. And so from last school year, given the timeline for when we needed to bring it to you all for approval, we kind of did laying the foundation last year with our professional development, building the framework, establishing the timelines. And so what is being brought tonight is a much more in-depth, detailed, and prescribes development guidelines for each of the roles that I just kind of described, all the way from administrator down to paraprofessional. And so, again, part of the annual yearly requirements is bringing this for you all to approve. And at this point, are there any questions about the handbook itself?
Can you discuss any major changes from, I guess, the previous year?
Like I said, the major changes is just fleshing it out to become more detailed and specific. Currently,
I mean, so it's all on paper now, I understand that, but in practice, are there any major changes from what we did last year?
The only major changes is switching out some of our contracted services with another provider. So essentially, no, we're not necessarily changing, but we are closely evaluating and scrutinizing our professional development contracted services or just overall conferences and things that we're attending. We do all that through our DEIC, and so that gives every stakeholder at that committee an opportunity to voice their opinion about what they would prefer to see or what kind of feedback they'd like to give so that we can improve upon that practice. And so that's kind of been the practice that we do. And so what's been brought tonight is part of what we worked on in the DEIC committee last year was working through some of the things that we wanted to see improved, of which was a more in-depth and detailed handbook that kind of prescribes each role according to the requirements that they need to meet each year.
And
That's the
then,
biggest change, is just differentiating it. So if a teacher or a nurse or a counselor really wanted to know more about the requirements, they could easily locate that information, and according to the way TMISD expects all that to be completed. And that's really the biggest change there, is just the state has some requirements, but specifically for the district and specific to the role, what does that look like? When do I need to complete that? How do I do it? When is it due? And so forth.
do you know if our mentor teacher training, I guess, section for 0 year teachers, does that meet the state's mentor allotment so we can receive funding for mentorship? Their requirement? Because right now we don't receive any, but it is a potential allotment. So I didn't know if
There
it was.
is, but I feel like that's part of a specific grant that's more grow your own related. It's aligned, the grant that you're speaking of is the allotment, but it's aligned to a grant that has specific requirements. And we have not dabbled into that quite yet, just because of the overwhelming feedback that we received from our beginning of the year and mentor-mentee teachers. Because currently we use Lead Forward, And we go through the first-year teacher academy through Lead Forward. And anyone who's aware of Lead Forward, that's a very top-notch premium professional divider. And based on the feedback and just our relationship with them, there's been a request to not make any changes there. However, part of the request that was brought forward was to be more specific as a district to help better provide support and training to the mentor teachers. And so one thing that we're changing this year is assigning Dr. Allison Sham to lead the mentors for the district. And we're going to be scheduling a meeting cadence with those mentors so that they are hearing from the district about our expectations as they kind of align to Lead Forward with those 0-year teachers, so that we're kind of a two-pronged approach with the multifaceted supports that we're looking to put in place this school year.
So this is more specific for all TMISD staff.
Yes.
And that program is
Specific for mentors, 0-year
the
teachers.
people that actually qualify.
Yes, ma'am.
Because not all teachers will qualify for the allotment program.
Correct.
Okay.
And if that is something you want us to look more in detail about, that would just kind of be something that we would switch to. We would move away from Lead Forward and
Oh, I
get
wouldn't
into
want to
that.
switch to anything.
And that's kind
I
of where
just-
we're at. It's like,
yeah.
do we really want to leave what's working to try something
I
that
didn't
we're not for sure yet?
I wasn't aware the allotment was tied to a different
That's my
program.
understanding. If you're talking about something different, I'd love to know what that is, but my understanding is the Grow Your Own, that's a grant, which gives you an allotment, but there's significant requirements attached to all that to make it work.
Okay. And then substitutes, is that considered auxiliary staff within that section? Because I didn't see,
Yeah, I
outside
didn't
of that, I
get too
don't.
specific about substitutes, but we do provide initial onboarding and orientation training, which goes above and beyond what the basics require. And so I can add that back in if it would help make the handbook more complete.
I'm more concerned about, I guess, yeah, that would help, but also just subs that help around special education children. And I know they're not specifically assigned to an individual, but just being in that environment is a whole new layer of rules that should be clearly, I guess, would be.
Is
nice
there
to be
criteria
laid out.
for that, for who gets to go into, what subs get to go into special needs? Is there a criteria? There isn't, is there?
You wanna take that one?
Yes, I do all the training for the substitutes, and what I do is I have like a, I don't know, maybe like a 50 PowerPoint program. It takes us about 2 hours, and we just do everything in general. And we have, the main things is, what are the don'ts? Don't touch the kids when you're disciplining them. Don't communicate with text. This is what you can do. This is what you cannot do. But I will say that when we go out and do a substitute, we do talk about special education. I tell them, it takes a very, very special person to work with special education children. And not everybody can do it. And what we have experienced is that we already have substitutes on board who can do that, and they're requested. And when we have like an adaptive education para, we just don't put it out there for anybody. Sometimes we'll say, we're gonna have this opening, are you willing to help us? Because they already know. Gabe, am I, that is correct. We don't just put it out there for everybody. And if we should get someone who does pick up the assignment, we watch it. If it doesn't work out, we do not allow them to pick up those classes. And we're gonna have one next Tuesday at 5:30.
You're gonna have what?
A substitute orientation.
Orientation, where
Just to
at?
make sure, at the middle school library. You're all welcome to attend, just to bring in the last group. And I can also provide you the handbook that I have, that I follow.
And then
Because I will say, Ms. Villalobos, that handbook was specific to hired employees of the district. Substitutes are hired, but they work a little bit different than.
Full-time.
Yeah, the full-time, because that's really what that handbook is intended for, is our full-time employees. They're
Part-time seasonal.
educators and certified and non-certified and all that.
last question.
Sure.
Monthly meeting cadence.
That was extra.
Yeah, I know. How has, I guess, the department heads meeting changed with no longer like early dismissal on Wednesdays?
That would be would you like to answer that, Gabe?
So campus for each individual campus, the high school campus, we've arranged for them to have the same common conference period so that we can talk to them directly. However, for the after-school stuff that happens, they still meet with their departments after school as they normally would. Their workday isn't over until 20 minutes after the bell, which is plenty of time for them to meet. We also have arranged for professional development funds so that maybe on a day the workload is light, that we can get a substitute in there and then they can plan out the entire year or the entire 6 weeks or whatever unit is coming up. A lot of our principals felt that at the end of the day on a Wednesday, our teachers were tired. We weren't getting the bang for the buck as opposed to starting in the morning, letting them work all the way through. We felt that was a much better option.
So they're still getting that amount of time to plan. It's just being done at a different time.
Yes, ma'am. And it's more specific to those groups that are EOC related and tested, as opposed to the art teacher who doesn't have another person to even plan with. They were still getting that time, and that seemed very, I guess I'd say waste of their time.
Wasteful.
But it
We
was.
said not the
Not
best bang for the
productive.
buck.
Right.
Okay.
Whereas
So
now what you
it's not
said
in here
about-
because now it's more
Yes, and
individualized.
just wanted to go into just a little bit more detail of what he said about curriculum writing and planning. To me, that is where we get the biggest bang for the buck because it's very intentional, scheduled, and specific to meet the needs of the actual teachers that are going to be kind of completing that workshop. And so, like he said, for the art teacher and for those who we give one day for everybody at the same time, it doesn't always work out for everyone, given their schedules and their needs. This allows us to be more intentional and specific so that if and when we do need to spend funds, we can spend them wisely. Because like he said, the focus is teaching as much as we can with the kids in the seats and with the teachers face-to-face with the students.
Yeah.
And so that's now being shifted a bit to become more of the priority so that Wednesday isn't treated as if it's kind of like, it looks different than Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Now we get to streamline, have expectations across the board, Monday through Friday, and we also felt that that would help communication with parents and just the overall kind of operational aspects of the campus.
And that professional development budget is within the campus or within curriculum?
Depends on which account, and it's
Okay.
also dependent upon which accounts or how you're looking at those professional funds, because we do have federal, we do have some local. It really just depends on what the need is.
Those are all my questions.
Anybody else? All right.
Madam President, it is the administration's recommendation that the board approve the district professional development plan as presented.
I'll make the motion. Administrator recommended the Board of Trustees approve the 23-24 district personal development plan as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Paul Mastella makes the motion and it is seconded by Leo with the administration's recommendation that the board approve the district professional development plan as presented. All those in favor? No opposed, motion carries 7-0. The next item is number 8, discuss and consider the first reading of TASB Update 121.
Chrissy, did we?
So we are going to go ahead and hold off on first reading. The only reason why, and it's just as a precaution, it is an agenda item. However, when we built the agenda, I didn't list specifically every item that needs to be considered. So out of an abundance of caution, we're going to hold it till the August 7th meeting. Okay?
Do you need a motion to do that, or is that adequate?
We can make a motion and just cover ourselves.
Abundance of caution.
I would, because it's an agenda item.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it was an agenda item
Yes.
that was requiring a vote, so.
We'll make the motion.
Motion to postpone, yeah. I'm not saying it, but.
And make the motion to hold on this item until the August 7th meeting, which is to consider the first reading of TASB Update 121. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor? None opposed? None opposed. Motion carries 7-0. All in favor. All right, item number 9, agenda item, discuss and consider the second reading of TASB local updates, EIC and EIF local.
Madam President, this is just a continuation from the last special meeting we had in which we went through the first reading. Based on the first reading and the feedback received, there also was included the courses from high school with the GPA weight associated with that course based on the request received. And so that is part of the update. And at this point, are there any questions about EIC or EIF local?
I just had a comment. I don't feel comfortable putting any course that comes from a college, a dual credit course, at a 5%. I see the majority of the 5% are sports, which I'm okay with, but I don't feel comfortable with anything coming from a college, which is, I want to say it was only like 4 of them.
There's a lot of them.
It's a lot of them?
Yeah, I'd say,
Yes.
why specifically, or at least the ones that you're looking at?
Well, wait. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It is nearly every Coastal Bend College course.
Oh, it's all the Coastal Bend one?
And I believe what you're referring to is the differentiation between the academic dual credit and the technical dual credit. And we kind of talked before in the first read was we were going to differentiate between the two because we agreed that prioritizing the academic, knowing the rigor and knowing the level of work involved with the academic courses
Yeah, I
versus
agree
some of
with
the
that. I
technical.
didn't-
We just wanted to differentiate and distinguish between the two to kind of honor that.
And I think the other thing you have to notice is that the ones that come in from TAMUK, those are not TSI required courses. So there is an extra level of rigor to take those courses. So for instance, speech, philosophy, health, there is no TSI requirement, whereas English, math, there is a TSI requirement. So it's harder to get into those classes where the general population could take those courses. They cannot take those courses without passing the TSI. So it is a much more difficult class to get into.
I see 12. Where, these are the CTE courses?
You want to name them and I can tell you what
Yeah,
they
say
are.
if you're more specific, we can probably
Actually,
answer.
every course that's on here.
There's just a lot of courses, so.
There's
Like I don't see a welding.
Welding's a Coastal Bend College course.
But
It's broken up into what its actual name is at the college level, not, we don't call it Welding 1 or Welding 2. So you might see it as a safety and security, or safety, a safety course for welding.
Isn't there one that says film?
There's one that's film filaments and
I always think of the movies, but it's.
yeah, so I'm saying the
Yeah,
list,
it's one of the actual welding courses.
the list provided here doesn't show something like that at a .05.
can you tell me which course you're seeing there specifically? What's it called?
I think she's just asking, and what is welding weighted at?
It's at a .05.
It's a .05.
Yeah, but it's not on this list. Like I see AP Studio Art, Art Appreciation History, basketball, soccer, baseball, swimming, bus and business and professional communication, choir, cross-country, Spanish, music.
Yeah, there's some more 5% down, further down.
If the question is you want to see the actual welding, I can get that separate so that you're not having to sift through the numerous amounts of courses here. You can just look specifically at that.
So, but
I don't think this is a full
She didn't feel
list.
comfortable with a .05. I guess the question would be why?
Yeah, say, because like I said, we talked before in first read, it was to differentiate the academic versus technical, and by
I guess
giving
I-
the 5 versus.
I wasn't concerned about the CTE. On the list I'm looking at, there's no CTE on here. The list I was looking at was the 10 MOOC courses we're referring to the TSI. And that's just a handful of them.
So to answer your question, I guess a little more directly, every course that we have to offer at TEMUC is crosswalked to a state course. If that state course transfers over into a core course, either math, science, social studies, or English, then that is given the weight of, 1.5. If it's an honors course that's, or a TEMUC course that translates to an elective course that's provided by the state, then that's where it gets the 0.5. I do not think there is a single one of those that crosswalks over to that side where there's a TSI that's not required. So, for instance, if you're looking at Introduction to Psychology, the 2301, okay, that is crosswalked into a history course on the high school side provided by the state. So that one should be a 1.15. It also has a TSI requirement that the kid has to pass the reading and the writing to take. So that's why those courses were assigned that weight. Art history is defined as Art 1. It is not a TSI required course, and it is an elective course. So that got the 1.05 credit. To answer the question, the amount of CTE courses that a student takes will far exceed the amount that an academic kid will take. So it is whether or not, from a cosmetology perspective, if we went down that route, whether or not the very basic course of Introduction to Nails is at the same rigor as calculus. Because that's what we're kind of saying, if we keep them weighted the same. The issue with the cosmetology courses, those courses are taught in 3-week intervals. So the kid who's a cosmetology kid will have nearly double to triple the amount of courses they're able to take in the same time frame as a kid who is taking all engineering classes at TAMUC. So therefore, we didn't feel that the weights would be, we're weighting the courses in accordance with having to make up that as well. It's the sheer number that the welding student who's getting his associates or her associates, the cosmetologist, the amount of courses they take, because the time frame is different, is going to far exceed that.
Yeah, but all the CT is 10%, not 5%, right?
What you're looking at, those are practicums. Are you looking at the practicums, the CT practicums? I'm not sure where you're looking.
It'll give you, at the bottom it does, like on your computer, gives you a page number.
It's
Find
Or just kind of tell me what
I
course.
hear you, but I
It's
right past,
So page 112, 113, somewhere in there. I mean, you're looking at the CB, all the CB prefix courses, right?
those are
They all say
10%.
1.10, there's no 1.05, is what you're saying.
Correct. The .05s, there's 12 classes. They look like all 10-minute classes. That was,
And there's also some CB courses that our kids would take that are tied to, for instance, if you're getting your associates, you would take a math class at Coastal Bend College that would count towards your associates and fulfills the math credit required by the state. So those courses would be at a 1.0 or 1.10.
Yeah, I think we're talking about the 0.5 difference between the academic versus the technical, because the
No.
technical's listed at
I guess that's-
0.10 versus 0.15.
I'm
that the
okay with
difference?
that. I'm talking about downgrading the 12 classes that we used to hold at 0.1 now to 0.05.
So for instance, like the athletics,
Not athletics, but the college courses,
The general psychology.
yes.
Right, is
General,
0.05.
used to be 0.1, now it's 0.05.
Right.
Those were mine.
and it's for the reasons he mentioned about the levels of rigor and then differentiating between that and the dual credit aspect of that at Kingsville, for instance.
And we will adjust based on those needs. So if, in other words, when we crosswalk it to the state side, if we're crosswalking it to something that is gonna fulfill the core, then it should be at a 1.10. So I do apologize, that one should be at a 1.10, because psychology falls under the social studies portion of the Texas code, or it's under when
I
it's
think it's
crosswalk.
because of the honors elective. I think, is that the reason why it's categorized that way?
It should, if we're taking, that one for sure is TSI required, that one should be at a 1.10. So that is a mistake. So I will take a look at it again, and
The intro to psychology and philosophy,
that should be a 1.10, because those are all crosswalks.
those are the ones I'm
Are
concerned
those the
about.
ones?
Yes.
Okay, I see now what you're
Those are
talking
crosswalk
about.
to social studies classes at the state level.
Yes.
So those should be at a 1.10. I do apologize if that is incorrect.
So should we make that note before we approve anything? Are we
Well,
approving?
you're not
something?
approving the
Okay,
courses,
okay.
you're approving the policy that, this to me is an extension from that, to give you the example of which we've made some findings that need correcting.
But in the policy, dual credit and honors elective, the dual credit part of 0.05 is 12 classes, minus some mistakes.
So it's, yes.
In essence, yes, correct.
But
Unless you
it's
find
also,
anything else.
and that, the dual credit honors elective would be classes that, just think of it this way, they're crosswalked to a state code that makes it an elective. So if we were ever to add a course in the future, wherever it falls on the state side would dictate the weight.
I just, depending on your degree plan, like, intro, like, they could not be electives.
What do you mean?
So earlier we were talking about philosophy. If I was a philosophy major, that's not an elective to me. That's my core class.
From the state of Texas perspective, you need 3 history credits to graduate.
Yeah.
Philosophy would fulfill one of those 3.
I see what you're saying, the
One of those
humanitarians.
3, right. So it would never count as an elective to a kid to fulfill that state graduation requirement. It would always count under the history requirement, because it's crosswalked to a history course that the state offers.
And of course, if they already met all those requirements, then it falls into the category as an elective.
This is a 5th math or a
Right.
5th English. But we still would give them the weight, just as a kid who takes calculus gets a weighted, even though that is their 5th math class.
And when do these weights go into effect? Is it going to be per semester or end of year?
It will be at semester, since.
At
most-
semester?
Yes. We were able to wait, then we were able to figure it out. Mr. Russell was able to figure out how to get that in our system to click over. So we are able to pull a weighted GPA at semester, which we have not been able to do before. So you are able to see it live as it goes. What we have to figure out, the tricky part that we still have left is figuring out, I know the board was worried about things such as AB honor roll and things of that nature being able to show at semester or at the 6 weeks with the weights. We have not figured that out yet.
Yeah, I think that's only fair to all students that it be weighted per that time. They're missing out on awards and recognitions because of it.
We just haven't been able to figure that out yet.
Are there any other questions?
You have a question, Paul?
No,
Oh,
I'm just,
okay.
never
Okay.
mind.
I was just making sure you didn't have a question. No more questions or comments? Okay, I think we have a
Okay.
recommendation.
Madam President, it is the administration's recommendation that the board approve the TASB local updates to EIC and EIF local as presented.
Do I have a motion?
I make that motion.
Ed makes the motion. You second that, Janie?
Yes.
Okay, Janie seconds it. All those in favor? None opposed. Motion carries 7-0. Next agenda item is number 10, discuss and consider approval for dates for Lone Star governance. So I'll go ahead and read the background information and rationale. As a result of the agreed resolution and action plan between the Tolosa Midway ISD and the Texas Education Agency, the TMISD agreed that all current members of the Board of Trustees and Superintendent will collectively and simultaneously complete the Lone Star Governance LSG two-day workshop conducted by a TEA LSG provider/coach as a team of 8 by August 15, 2023. Unfortunately, the superintendent is unable to attend the Friday, July 14th, 2023 training. According to Monica Coloma with TEA, has communicated to Adele Cueva, ESC-2 representative, the TMISD team of 8 has no flexibility regarding the completion of the training prior to the August 15th, 2023 deadline. I fear if the district does not complete any component of the resolution, the agency would be justified in implementing sanctions on TMISD. The objective for Monday, July 17th will be to agree to 2 dates for training prior to the August 15th deadline. Lastly, the ESC-2 has agreed to provide training upon request by the district, and this was from Mr. Van Maitre. So do y'all have dates for discussion?
They have to be consecutive.
They have to be consecutive, and we all have to be there.
They have to be weekdays?
I do not know the answer to that. I know that we were unable to get a Saturday previously.
Yeah, because you can't get Saturdays, and you have baseball and stuff on Friday through the weekend, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to bite the bullet on any of these dates.
Okay.
Did Mr. Van Maitre have any dates?
Saturday only, right?
I know he mentioned maybe a Wednesday, Thursday might be a little bit more flexible for everybody else, but I don't know. I don't have an actual date.
I emailed the president and vice president, Mr. Van Maitre, the 20th through the 23rd of July, I won't be available.
Right. He said that, yeah, Mr. Benavides has some specific blackout days.
Same.
I won't be available.
I will not be available.
July, you said, right?
July. Yeah. So it would be this coming Thursday through next Monday, I won't be here,
This Thursday through,
next Monday.
Well, I can't take off work that quick anyway, so.
What's the deadline, August 8th?
August 15th.
So why don't you do, well, I don't know. Monday's the board meeting, right?
Correct.
I'll just do that and roll into the board meeting Monday. That's a long
The
day.
training's not
No,
here
it's
though,
all
right?
day.
I know,
No, the training
I know, but the
yeah.
training would be over, then the board meeting would be at night.
That's,
So
that's.
that's a long day. That's a long day.
I'd rather hand it over like that.
You'll be brain dead by
Yeah.
the time of the day, I'm telling
Well,
you.
they won't know that, we'll just close our, everybody wears sunglasses.
Yeah.
So we're looking,
How about
You
August the
propose
8th and 9th? Tuesday and Wednesday.
8th and 9th.
How about
I guess,
August 3rd and 4th? That's a Thursday, Friday. But y'all looking at Tuesday, Wednesday?
well, Tuesday and Wednesday keeps, the weekend open to, people who have
Other obligations.
other obligations. And I think Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday would be our best bet. I mean, one of those days.
Which dates are those been?
You either got the 31st and the 1st, or the 7th and the 8th. Or the
7th is the
24th.
board meeting, so we don't want to do
Yeah.
that.
You will be
8th and
great,
9th.
I'm telling you.
The 8th and 9th.
I feel like that's cutting it very close.
That is very- In other words, if there's
There's no-
any hiccup
yeah.
anywhere, there's no.
Hey, we sent our
wiggle room
response
on
back
anything.
before midnight the day we had to do it.
That's right.
Well,
Yes.
Remember we said
I
it?
mean, as long as we do it, I mean, before the 15th, we can do it on the 14th.
yeah, I kind of really need a 2 weeks
Okay.
notice to my employer.
So what's it
I
gonna be,
mean,
the
the
first?
the August 8th and
8th and
9th
9th
works for me.
That works for me too.
Also,
Are they both full days, or are we talking the evening?
8 to 5.
Two full days.
Or that, the initial one was 8 to 5.
Oh, okay. I didn't even realize it.
I didn't either, Leo. I thought they
it
were
was in
like
the
after
evening.
work.
I was like,
I was like, yeah, I'm
oh.
available. And
What
then
do you have, Janie?
Conflict, yeah.
You have a conflict the
I have a
8th and
conflict,
9th? Okay,
Well, the 8th for sure. My husband's having surgery.
that would be a conflict.
So
First
9,
and
What
10.
about the 1st and 2nd?
Okay, first.
Surgery on the 8th. My goodness.
First and second for me is good, but
Also same.
For me too.
I can make it work, I mean, if it gets us all in the room.
Well, that's the most important thing for us to remember, is that we've all got to be there. And if you're sick, come with your mask.
Yep.
I'm just saying, we've all got to be here, the whole team of
I
8.
mean, I'll be here as long as if I can get here.
No, I know. They were just real specific on that.
Well, I'm not too happy with TA, I don't mind telling you, Kim, I mean, you know, they want us to abide by what they want, but yet they didn't let us do what they found out, so that's, that's, it's not like they can come put us in jail.
Yeah, we don't want to jeopardize the district either.
I
though.
understand that, but, they didn't fulfill all their stuff either.
Is he okay with it?
Can you text Mr. Van Matry and see if August 1st and 2nd works for him?
Can I give you a response after closed session?
Yeah, because we're not,
But it looks good for the 1st and 2nd, I guess, right?
yeah, that's fine for me.
If he can do it, then are you okay with it?
I mean, I'm saying yes, I have to get it approved, but I'm sure it'll be
Well,
fine.
it's gonna be somebody from the Education Service Center. It's not gonna be a TEA person. This is just someone that they use, like they do in all the other places. Unless you go through the 2-year program, a year and a half, whatever it is.
Okay, so everybody is good from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. August 1st and August 2nd. So we'll tentatively say that that's going to be our dates, and we'll wait to hear back from Mr. Van Matry. And is there a second date that maybe we want to look at so that we have 2 dates in case this one doesn't work?
8 and 9? Oh, you can't the 8th, right?
Right, yeah, I can't.
How about the 9th and 10th? What is that,
Well,
Wednesday and Thursday?
her husband would have just had
Just had
surgery.
surgery, that's
Yeah.
Prior.
not been very considered. How about, now, when did you say you were gonna be gone from when to when, the 21st through when?
This weekend.
Just this weekend?
Yeah.
So, and Fridays are not good for you? I mean, like the 27th and 28th?
They work for me.
Yeah, or the 25th and 26th. I mean, I know it's not good for Kim, but it'd be a backup alternate.
Yeah, I would rather do it the early part of the week.
Well, if we did it the 26th and 27th, I'm getting a little bit closer to my 2-week mark. Today's the 17th.
Yeah, you ain't getting that close. That's 10 days, 9 days.
Well, right now I'm giving them a 4 days notice. That's not gonna,
For what? Oh,
for coverage at my employer. Oh,
no.
you're talking about what? August what? I'm sorry.
No,
July,
July.
27, 28.
27th, 28th.
10 days,
So
11
10
days.
days from now.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's a Thursday and Friday.
yeah.
Can't do the 26th and 27th?
That's still the time frame that she's got to do
Yeah.
it. Paul's got to make arrangements. It's your job too, right?
No, I'm pretty good. You can call it.
Leo, I guess, he's done with it. You have to be making arrangements as
So I can
well.
be video that.
Are there any conflicts with the first week of August?
The first and the second?
Like the third
I
and
was just
fourth?
coming up with alternates.
Well, that's what we had set the first and second, no?
Oh, so-
Yeah, I mean, you could,
That Tuesday
the
and
first
Wednesday?
and second or the third and fourth, if you want
You have to
to just tie that whole week up, I mean.
pack up, pick something if you have a backup if something doesn't work out, Because you can't plan for emergencies.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna do,
Hurricanes.
and if I'm hearing this correctly, we're gonna go either August 1st and 2nd or the same week of August 3rd and 4th?
Or second and third, or third and fourth, I mean.
Yeah, any,
Okay, any days in the week of August 1st through,
Correct.
we will make it work. This team of 7 here, right here is gonna make that work.
we gotta have the 8th one here though.
We'll need specific dates though. All right. Any other comments, suggestions, discussion? We can do this, right?
Yeah.
We'll do it 'cause we need to do it. All right.
That's what we'll do.
All right. No, we don't have to take any action on that. It's just for board discussion. Let's see, next is discuss and consider approval of consent agenda items. Number 1 is the check payment register. Any questions? No one? My screen just went completely black over here. So no questions on the check payment register? All right, number 2, the tax collection report. None? All right, and number 3, minutes for regular and special called meetings. Right. Someone gonna make that recommendation?
Madam President, it's the administration's recommendation that the board approve the consent agenda items as presented.
I'll make that motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, Paul Mastella makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Leo seconds. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries 7-0. Closed session, the board will convene in closed meetings as authorized by the Texas Open Meetings Act to discuss items allowed by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551.071-0.076, .082, .0821, .083, .084. It is 8:42 p.m. and we are now in closed session. All right, it's Monday, July 17th, 2023, and it is 9:47, and we have reconvened from closed meeting. And we have action resulting from closed session deliberation.
Madam President and board members, it is recommended that the Board of Trustees issue all educator probationary contracts as presented.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll
Do we have
second
a
it.
second? We have a motion made by Ben and a second by Paul Mastella. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries 7-0. We have a future meeting,
We have another
August.
one.
Oh, sorry.
It is recommended that the Board of Trustees issue a probationary administrative contract to Vanessa Riggs.
We have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. Ben makes that motion and Paul seconds it. All those in favor? None opposed, motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
All right, was it August 7th?
It's the next special meeting.
Special called board meeting, and then our regular board meeting will be August 21st, 2023, and we will also have Lone Star Governance, hopefully on August 1st and 2nd, 2023. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Ben and the rest of the trustees. Do I have a second? Leo makes that second. All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. It is 9:49 PM and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, y'all.
Thank you, everyone.